Did you think you could expect cleaners and guests to be reasonable? Good luck. I thought so too, but I was wrong. Now you've realized it's not all sunshine and 5-star reviews. That means you're in the right place. Ever look at your calendar and just see that next weekend is vacant and notice your new bookings have suddenly dropped off a cliff? Nobody is immune to Airbnb dropping your listing in visibility for no apparent reason. Today, we answer a question from Victor, who wants to know why this is happening to him. That's because this is the community where we talk about the gross, the awkward, and the operational messes, as well as the real strategies that help you keep going instead of quitting. Because this industry is somewhere where you can win big, or you can ignore education and you can quit. Welcome to Short-Term Rental Problems and Solutions. Let's get into today's question. Good morning, Jeremiah. I bought this house 6 months ago because the previous owner had it booked solid at $10,000 per month in revenue. Over the first 4 months of ownership, I was hosting his transferred bookings, and I really expected the house to be earning more by now. I priced the nightly rent to prioritize smaller groups with variable rent based on occupancy, and I increased my minimum nightly rate based on expected occupancy and a break-even calculation. Now I'm looking at a practically empty calendar and have 5 stars in all categories, and Airbnb says my listing is a guest favorite. I feel like the previous owner tricked me. How is it possible that I can be highly rated and priced at break-even rates and still fail? More importantly, what tips have you got for me? Thank you, Victor. You're not alone. This happens to me. It happens to all of us. And by correcting this problem several times, I can provide you with some tips to help you follow for sure and get out of this rut. And that's essentially what it is. We'll get into all the different dynamics of the algorithm. What I want to emphasize is this. Usually it is a mystery only because we don't understand the algorithm Airbnb utilizes to determine the amount of visibility your listing gets. Most people simplify it, but it's actually very complex. And we'll get into that in this episode. I'll explain from my perspective some of the factors that the algorithm considers when determining your visibility. First, I want to focus on your comparison that the previous owner was succeeding and that you're failing. Consider instead, if I buy Babe Ruth's bat, am I going to hit a record number of home runs in my career because I have the same bat as the great Bambino? Consider this as an alternative. I buy the number 19 car driven by Chase Briscoe, who won the NASCAR Great American Getaway 400. Last year, that was the race at the Pocono Raceway. Can I jump into the driver's seat of his Toyota Camry, sponsored by Bass Pro Shops, and beat Danny Hamlin and compete with 36 other cars and drivers to squeeze out the win? No. The first issue is I don't have the Joe Gibbs racing team fueling me and changing my tires quickly and reliably. Second, I'm not 30 anymore, and I don't have 10 years of experience racing at that level. Short-term rentals are much more comparable to traditional businesses than long-term rentals or commercial real estate. You can underwrite an apartment complex of 800 units much more easily. It already has management, and you have the option of keeping that team in place. With short-term rentals, you might get a new cleaner, you might get a new handyman, you might change up the pricing strategy, you might change up booking preferences too. The success and failure are based much more on how you operate your business. If you miss everything else from today, hear this. Rental history means nothing when you purchase a short-term rental. In fact, the investment has a better potential for return on investment if the rental history is bad. That's like me telling you that to buy the Eagles, an NFL team, just because they won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. But you can't keep the same head coach. Why do I say it's better for return on investment to buy something with poor rental history? Because the best investments are made with the ability to recognize the property was poorly managed, which reduces its perceived value. Therefore, you'll be able to get something that's already ready to go and just employ some of these new techniques and strategies in order to get that fantastic return. But you'll still be able to acquire the property below market value. So how does the algorithm work? Well, I'll go in order from things that we know for a fact to things that are a little more speculative. You'll see this algorithm is as complicated as Facebook or TikTok, and there's a good reason for that. That reason is that it increases platform effectiveness. And we all benefit from Airbnb's market share as they compete with resorts and hotels. The first thing that they say very openly is that your visibility is impacted by your conversion rate. When guests are shopping around, they might type in Lake Harmony, 4 people, and they're going to see a host of listings. What determines which listings they see? Well, Airbnb as an organization wants to give the highest probability that that guest is going to book. And by putting the properties that have the highest conversion rate right up in front, they're increasing their likelihood that they're going to get a reservation. So if the guest put in dates, then Airbnb is going to show that guest the properties that it thinks they're most likely to book. Now, it's going to consider things like their history, what they've clicked on in the past, and how long they hover over your listing before they move on to another one. This is not just, did they click on my listing and how long did it take for them to make a reservation? This includes them clicking on your listing, and then if they send a message to the host, if they do an instant book, if instant book is even on, if they ask questions, or if they just back out of that house. This means that there's a ton of things on your listing that could be impacting that conversion rate, which we're going to get into shortly. But you can actually track your conversion rate on Airbnb. It's actually something that you can find, and you can keep track of that. And that metric is one of the number one factors that perceived value. See, again, Airbnb only wants to promote your listing because they believe they're going to get a commission if somebody books your listing. If they don't think that that's a very good listing, they're not going to be promoting it in front of people, because those people are likely to look into your listing and then determine that they don't really want to book it. So the higher your conversion rate, the better. That is like the number one for sure. We know that this is one of the biggest factors impacting our reservations and impacting our visibility. So before you can get booked, people have to find you. And in a marketplace like ours, when they type in Lake Harmony, they're going to find like over 1,000 listings. So there's several pages of results. And if they're only searching based on, 4 people, then they're going to see even the big houses. If they're only searching for 4 people and a hot tub and a pet, then hopefully they still see yours, but they're going to see only even though they've added in some filters, there's still going to be hundreds of listings. The second thing to remember is, even though they typed in Lake Harmony, doesn't mean they're only seeing listings in Lake Harmony. When I look in Lake Harmony, I find listings in Blakesley and Albrightsville and Pocono Lake, anything surrounding Lake Harmony. And that also has to do with my search history on Airbnb. But it is not just limiting you to a geographical region when you do a search. So the algorithm has a lot of flexibility in what it can present, but it's putting the best fruit at the front of the cart because it wants people to stop, linger, negotiate a little bit, and make a purchase. And at the end of the day, Airbnb doesn't care if it's the higher priced properties or the lower priced properties. I think they just want another reservation. They just want a guest for the first time ever to make a reservation on Airbnb. They just want that activity. They just want people to walk through the door. So they don't care if your pricing is high. They want it to be low because that improves conversion rate. So if your pricing is low, then people look at your property, the perceived value is high compared to the price. So if they pick your house out of a long list to book the house, then that obviously is why they want to put your listing up at the top. Now, a lot of people, their analysis of why their reservations fell off a cliff is this far. That's about as far as they go. It's just, okay, well, conversion rate. All right. How do I get my conversion rate better? And we'll get into that, but you've got to understand it's incredibly complex, some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. And some of this is just speculation because they're not going to fully throw out there what their actual algorithm is. But some of this is for sure. Like the next item I've got here, which is value. So another one of those areas that we know for sure impacts your visibility is the perceived value. So if the guest perceives value for your property, or like if Airbnb looks at the cost per night divided by the number of beds, or whatever. They're going to throw you in a category. They're going to look at the competitors around you, and they're going to look at your perceived value. That's going to impact your visibility as well. So it's also the ratings. So this is like a no-brainer. We all know if you have bad ratings, they're going to be placing you on page 2, 3, 4 towards the end. I saw a listing yesterday that had 4.16 stars. Now, it is only a matter of days until that listing gets taken down. They only have 4 reviews. So for them to only have 4.16 stars is a red flag. It's no surprise that they were trying to push their listing on Facebook. But nevertheless, getting off topic. One of those categories for ratings is value, and they prioritize value, which means all you revenue managers out there, if you're bleeding your guests dry and you're charging as much as you possibly can to get a reservation, you better back it up and add in something to make the guest feel like they're getting better value for what they're paying. Because if you don't surprise them when they get to their property with something that's going to improve their opinion of the value of the property to the point where they feel like they got a good deal, then your rating on value may suffer. If your rating on value suffers, guess what? You are not getting pushed in the visibility algorithm because they're looking at that value rating is they're looking at your guests and how your guests feel about the property as far as the value goes. That's more heavily weighted than the other ones like safety, cleanliness, and location. Although I feel like those are important as well, it's not just the overall 5-star rating. If a guest leaves 4 stars for value but 5 stars for everything else, it's going to impact your visibility. So it's not like the bar is so incredibly high that you can't make it. These are all these different metrics that you compete with all the other rental properties around you, and nobody needs to be perfect. Nobody is perfect. But the idea is you just want to know that the guests' expectations have to be met or exceeded when they get to your property. And if you keep on raising your price to the point where they feel like they were ripped off for your property, then you're going to be dropping down in the visibility search. So the other ratings do impact your visibility on the platform. Things like the overall rating for the house, the safety, the cleanliness, the location. It wasn't that long ago I hosted Jenny Snow on this podcast, and we were talking about some of the strategies that we employ with guests. And one of those strategies is to actually ask your guest how they felt when they walked up to the front door. Did they feel like the neighborhood was safe? Did they feel like the house was clean? Did they feel like it was a good location? And actually to answer those questions or, get to the heart of the matter head on. I like that idea. I like that approach because it means that there's not going to be any surprises. Additionally, there's questions that Airbnb is asking, and it's best to ask your guest those questions first. So the next thing, and this is something that Airbnb repeats over and over again, is that your visibility is impacted by your cancellation policy. Airbnb wants you to have this flexible cancellation policy. They have done their research and they've found that it's in their best interests for guests to be able to cancel and get a full refund. And I mean, truth be told, the guest is going to call Airbnb, give them a lame excuse, and Airbnb is going to issue the full refund anyway, regardless of what your cancellation policy is. So if it impacts your visibility, you might as well go with the flexible cancellation policy because Airbnb is going to let them cancel. Now, for most of my properties, I have a moderate, which means if the guest cancels less than 5 days before check-in, they only get a 50% refund. So this has happened a few times where I would credit the guest for a future stay, or I would refund them 50%. Or if I felt bad, I might give them a bigger refund, but maybe not the entire thing. Nevertheless, I've got a lot of registration fees that get paid when the guest is registered. And that typically happens 4 days before check-in because of the cancellation policy. I don't want my property owners losing money just because a guest, last minute they broke up with their boyfriend and now they don't want to stay. Well, I already paid $125 for your registration. Not only that, but because I can't accept another reservation because it would be a late registration, I'm just going to be empty. There's no way to refill those dates, if it's short notice. So I do get that, like, if you get a cancellation, Airbnb tries to get you rebooked, and that might work really well when you don't have to register all your guests. And that's probably something that I would do. I feel like it's worth moving to that flexible cancellation policy, even if it's just because it impacts your visibility. And, the guest is going to get a full refund anyway. If they're upset that they got a 50%, they're going to contact Airbnb half the time and they're going to get a full refund. Or they could do a chargeback on their credit card and then they get a full refund anyway. So I'm kind of up in the air what the effectiveness of the moderate cancellation policy is, but it's worked out for me a few times. Um, the next one that they've talked about, but only slightly, is completeness. This is the completeness of your listing. The context that I heard this from Airbnb in is that your host profile should be complete. So if it just has your name and your age, like what decade you were born in, it is certainly not complete. Go onto Airbnb, fill out a lot more information. It's not just the decade, it's also what you like to do as a hobby, if you have any pets, where you like to travel, things like that. They're going to ask you these questions and prompt you for it. You're just going to want to answer those questions, truthfully, but without divulging too much info. If you're a property manager, this is a really good spot to put down that you're in real estate or that you are a property manager. Reason for that is because if somebody sees your listing and they're looking for a property manager, this is a really good way for them to find you. um, Link over here to another episode that we had on how to find a really good property manager. Anyhow, back to the completeness thing. So your listing should be complete, meaning you go through all of the amenities that Airbnb has and you check off the ones that you have. You have to do the photo tour by room. So organize your photos into rooms. And then in those rooms, put down the beds, the bed sizes, make sure you've got a description under every single photograph. So you should have a caption on Airbnb. This is free SEO, This is a free way for you to add in and make your listing more complete is to label your photos. Even if you just put backyard or hot tub or gas grill, like you're not necessarily even explaining something that somebody can't tell from just looking at your photos, but it's because it's more complete that this could impact your visibility, where the listings that are not complete just don't get the same visibility. Airbnb feels like if your listing is complete, that the guest is more likely to have a good experience because their expectations are set a little bit better. Another one, and this is something I'm pretty sure Airbnb has talked about in the past, is your response rate. So when a guest sends you a message and it's like, hey, do you accept guests that are under 25? If you take an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours to respond to that guest, your response rate is really bad. And that response rate is also making Airbnb not really trust you with guests. So it's going to limit your visibility because of that. If your response rate is very fast, if you are getting back to that guest right away, those kinds of messages, that response rate is going to make a big difference. And they can and they do track how quickly you respond to guests and how responsive you are. I also feel like if they call you and you don't answer the phone, that might be something that they put on your profile. Not really sure about that. That's more of the speculative side of this episode, but it could have something to do with it. The next one is your conversion rate. So when somebody does make an inquiry, your conversion rate is affected because now that inquiry is you either accepting the reservation or not accepting that reservation. I almost always hit pre-approve. Now, this is actually a good time for me to get into some of the filters. So age limits. Now, I'm currently right now in Tobyhanna Township. Tobyhanna Township is not in Tobyhanna. Tobyhanna is not in Tobyhanna Township, though they are mutually exclusive. But they require that we put on our listing that the primary guest must be 25 years or older to book. Now, do they enforce this? They don't really know how old your guests are, but they have to have it on the listing. So, in order to improve our conversion rate, every single time a guest asks me how old they have to be to rent this place, I tell them it says 25, but I can make exceptions. Are you guys responsible? I want to make the guests feel like I'm pulling them like a favor. And I want them to book, even if they're under 25. Now, there are a couple property owners I know are not okay with that practice, and I don't do that for them. I make sure to follow their rules because this is their property at the end of the day that I'm managing. But if it was just about visibility, if it was just about conversion rate, that's the approach I'm taking. It's yes, it says 25. I can make some exceptions as long as you guys don't get me in trouble. There's things like that and strategies that we employ, and we mitigate risk in other ways. So don't get all worried. We've got this stuff under control. But that's a question that comes up a lot is like, they're not going to know what your age limit is until they click on your listing and scroll through the description, because that's really the only place for it. You can't really put that in a different category. People can't sort based on this. So people who are 19 or people who are 24, like they're looking for a place to go, but they're not going to be accepted for some of those places. And the listings where it's 25 or older to book, their conversion rate is being affected. Your conversion rate is being affected. And this, believe it or not, could make a huge difference, especially if your property, like if your property is built for like young people, if you've put a lot of like, I don't know, Pinterest or Instagrammable spots in your property, then you're going to be attracting that younger crowd. If you've built your house to be a party house, you're going to be attracting that crowd. And you have to be willing to accept that crowd because those are the ones that are going to be asking you if they can stay there. And if you keep telling them no, and people are making inquiries and then they're not making a reservation, that's actually really affecting your conversion rate. And it's affecting it in one of the biggest ways. It's weighted more heavily because they made an inquiry and because of how long it took you to respond. And because after you responded, the guest never made the reservation. So nobody's going to be perfect every time. You can't wrangle every single one of them in. And there are definitely guests that I say no to. Like if it's a $4,000 weekend and they're like, hey, could you do $1,000 for this? I'm going to say no. But keeping all this whole like conversion rate thing in mind, I'm going to tell that guest, no, I can't, but I can offer you a discount and I'm going to send you a special offer with the best I can accept for that weekend. Now, that might be like $3,400 or $3,600, or it might be $3,800. I'm still going to send a special offer because that's another thing that helps that guest say, okay, there's some value here. The guy did come down in price. Maybe we're negotiating a little bit back and forth. I want to have a conversation with that guest. I don't want to just shut them down. Okay. So I would never say, well, $1,000 is far too, I don't know, what's the word? $1,000 is far too insulting. Why would I even entertain a conversation with this guest? I'll tell you why. It's because you're on Airbnb and everything you do is being followed. And so your practices are going to impact your success on this platform. And so if you do not allow pets, this is a big one. A lot of guests are going to ask about pets. And if you do allow pets, but you don't allow cats, or you do allow cats and you don't allow dogs, or you, whatever, like anytime a guest clicks on your listing and then has to look through the information in order to weed themselves out, that's affecting your conversion rate. So sometimes guests will sort the properties that they're looking for based on which ones are pet friendly and which ones aren't. Sometimes they will sort based on the number of people in their group. Sometimes they don't. So when somebody clicks on your listing because you've got a great hero image, they should see a description there that is accepting and welcoming of all peoples. Instead, if they see something on there that says, no cats allowed, no old people allowed, no young people allowed, no no parties, no sound, no music, no bathing suits, no whatever. I don't know why I said bathing suits, but like you get it. The more issues you have in that description, the more problematic your conversion rate is going to be. So another thing, and this is a big topic last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago in Arrowhead Lakes, because they instituted a new variable rate short-term rental registration fees. It was $8.50 per person per day. And that's still what it is. But it is variable. So it's based on the number of people who are coming. So I had a property owner and, I managed their property. So they are the boss, right? So I had a property owner who required that I follow this strategy that I knew was going to be a failing strategy. And I didn't put my foot down at first. I just said, okay, we'll try it out. And it went horribly. Her listing was like buried. very deep in the search results. You had to zoom in really close on the map just for her to pop up. So I actually took over that listing and tried turning it around. So I employed some pricing strategies and we did get 3 reservations. The problem is, as soon as those reservations found out that there was additional fees that they had to pay, they canceled. And that killed us. For like the next 3 weeks, we weren't getting any more reservations, no matter how low I put the price. So things like this seriously impact your visibility. And young property managers might not necessarily understand this, but it's why your new bookings have fallen off a cliff. There's just so many reasons why this could happen. So if you have in your description that after the guest books the house, you're going to send a Venmo request or that you're going to send a payment request through the platform so that you're, following the actual platform policies. If you've got that in your description and the guest looks at it and sees, oh, I was willing to pay $1,200 for this week, but I'm not willing to pay an extra $8.50 per person per day. We're staying for 7 days. That's $56 per person. There's 10 of us. That's $550 extra. I'm already spending $1,500 for this place. I'm going to add on another 33%. Like, this doesn't seem like a good deal anymore. They back right back out of your listing and they never sent you a question. They never did anything. They just looked at the description and decided, I'm not going to book this place. So you definitely want all of your fees built in. There shouldn't be anything that's charged to the guest afterwards, even if you put it in the description, because now the description is what's causing your conversion rate to be bad. So age limits, pet limits, also nights. So one of the things that affects how you show up in search is the minimum number of nights. So take, for example, a guest that says, well, I only want to go up for Friday night. I've got to be back Saturday night. So it's going to cost me less if I stay for 1 night versus 2. That guest does not realize that the vast majority of properties in the Poconos are a 2-night minimum. So when they're searching through Airbnb and they put in Friday night, check out Saturday, they're not seeing any of the listings that are a 2-night minimum. Now, it might be a 2-night minimum for your property and for your community. I would encourage you to have a couple of dates that are still 1-night minimums. The length of the reservation should be as flexible as possible. So you should allow long-term stays. You should allow 1-night stays. I would encourage you to make that minimum as low as you can because it affects your visibility. If somebody is searching with just a 1-night search, they're not going to see your property. And the same thing is true for pets. The next thing I'm going to touch on is pricing. So I'm sure you figured out by now that there's special promos. When your listing is brand new, your first 3 reservations get a 20% discount. But because you're new, you also get a boost in visibility. So they're going to put you in front of more people so they can test out, your conversion rate, how good your marketing is. And a lot of those things have to do with completeness and blah, 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 blah. But your special promos are something you can do after you've got enough reviews that you can do special promos. Now, you would select up to 14 days on your calendar and you go in through the little gear icon. I'm sure you know how to do this. And you select a special promo. So there, they'll actually send your property out in emails. They will put a little slash on the thumbnail when people see your property. They'll see that it was this price and now it's this price. And that gives people the impression of value because they know it was priced higher. We all see what's actually going on here. Nobody pays MSRP at Kohl's. Kohl's is trying to tell me I saved $150. It's like, no, I didn't. I would not have bought these clothes if they were an extra $150. I shop at Kohl's because you're 45% off like all the time. So no, I didn't save any money. I spent money. I'm sorry, I get off topic sometimes. So the special promos is exactly what that is. I upcharge on Airbnb and then I add a special promo and that brings the price back down for the guest to give the impression that the guest is getting a good deal when the price is reduced compared to what it would normally be priced at. Special promos definitely affect your visibility because things like that are also going to help your conversion rate. But if you haven't done any special promos in a while, do some special promos. Do that instead of changing your base rate. The next one is fixed pricing and variable pricing. So we have to think about like your cleaning fee, your registration fee, those are fixed, right? If there's something else like a linen fee or whatever that you've got in there, you want to make sure that those numbers are low. Should they reflect what the cost actually is? Yeah, yeah. But they don't have to, right? So I messed around with one of my listings and I changed the cleaning fee from $250 down to $15. I changed the registration from $50 down to $5. Now my fixed cost was only 35 bucks. And I increased my nightly rate a lot. So my fixed price was lower, but my variable price was higher, much, much higher. So I ended up getting about the same payouts, but I was only getting like 2 night reservations. And I think that's just because when people were searching for 3 nights, I was now high priced compared to my competition. So you could go both directions with this. If your fixed price is too high, but your variable nightly rate is too low, what you're going to get is longer reservations, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But the guest is still looking at the total price. They're not looking at how much is it for 2 nights versus 3 nights. Oh, it's only this. It's only $60 more for me to add on a third night. They're not looking at it that way because they've already figured out what day they want to check in and what day they want to check out. And they're trying to keep that to a minimum because it affects their price. They're not necessarily doing the math. And as a former math teacher, I can tell you people hate doing math. Don't make them do math. But you can look at this curve and this graph, and you can say, where do I have the most success? And you can mess around with those figures as much as you want. I had lowered the nightly rate and I had lowered the fixed price. And both of those things have an impact on reservations and on visibility and on occupancy. What I would caution you though is don't put your fixed price, like your cleaning fee and everything else, don't put that too high because they don't want to see those things being too great because that impacts the perceived value from Airbnb's algorithm. Another one is that dynamic pricing. So you definitely should be using dynamic pricing. And we're going to get into pricing strategies and revenue management on another day. I actually invited Josh Messinger, who's one of my colleagues, to come onto the show so that we could talk about some of these pricing strategies that he's employing. The one thing that I want to really point out at this point is that in dynamic pricing, you've got your base rate. Your base rate determines how high or low your prices are going to be for the rest of the year. Now, the other thing that determines that is the perceived demand and what other properties are priced at. So, your base rate is like your throttle. It's the one control that you bring up or you bring it down in order to control your occupancy. So, the lower your pricing, the more bookings you're going to get. Obviously, if you went down to $1, you're going to get booked up real fast. If you went up to, I don't know, $5,000, you're not going to get any reservations. So somewhere in there is a sweet spot. So I will employ the strategy of building momentum. The momentum makes a big difference. And this is one of those things that's a little bit speculative, but I think that Airbnb sees that you just got 5 reservations or 4 inquiries, and they're like, wow, this person must have done something to make their property more attractive. Their conversion rate was this, but it just boosted over the last 3 days. They've got this really good conversion rate because they just got all these reservations. Let me promote them and keep up this momentum before they raise their pricing. That stuff happens. And so momentum impacts your visibility, but you have to start by lowering your price enough that you can build that momentum. So I look at it this way. I look at it like an airplane. Airplanes do not fly at 4,000 feet. Commercial airlines go all the way up to 33,000 feet or 30,000 feet. Do you know why? Because the air is thinner and they can burn less fuel and still go places. They can still go the same speed with less fuel if they're all the way up there in the, I don't know, stratosphere or whatever that is. I didn't really pay enough attention when it came to cumulonimbus clouds. And anyway, so math, not science. Nevertheless, the airplanes, they fly at that high altitude because they can burn less fuel at that level. So what they have to do is they burn so much fuel just on takeoff and on the climb. And then once you get up to cruising altitude, you can actually hear it in the cabin where the engines go like they start going way slower. And it's because they're already up at that elevation. They just want to maintain this speed, this altitude, and it's going to be a lot easier. From that point forward, it's a lot quieter in the cabin. And I look at the pricing strategies that same exact way. Is I'm going to keep my base rate low. That means I've got my throttle at like full throttle. I've got my base rate low until my occupancy and my momentum picks up. Once I've got occupancy and momentum, I'm going to be raising that base rate until both of those things start to slow down. And then I'm just trying to maintain that level of business. And that's when in revenue management you got things dialed in. But going back to the algorithm, your calendar actually has an impact as well. And again, this is speculation, but if you are solely on Airbnb and you're not blocking the house for projects, you're not blocking it for personal use, the platform knows that they can promote your property and you're not just going to block those dates. That guest is going to have the opportunity to book it because that is just not something that you keep doing. You don't keep blocking dates. Whereas if you are on multiple platforms and you get a reservation on VRBO, you've got to block those dates on Airbnb. Airbnb, I don't think likes that. I think they like to have complete control and availability of your calendar, whether it's full or empty. So when you block dates on the Airbnb calendar through software like HostAway or Hospitable, what's happening in Airbnb's mind is, well, I've got competition. This is not a chance for me to ratchet up the visibility. This is somebody I might not want to promote because they've got these calendars getting blocked because they're on other platforms. So the properties actually that I've seen be the most successful are 99% just on Airbnb or 99% just on VRBO. It's like they've built this successful strategy. They've built this successful rental for that platform, and the platform keeps promoting them. In which case, it's almost pointless to have software, except that the fact that you get better reporting, you get better metrics, you get automated messages, which you can also set up in Airbnb, but whatever. I think that the algorithm promotes the properties that do not block their calendar. So that's blocking it for personal use, that's blocking it because of reservations from other sources. And that kind of goes hand in hand with like, talking to guests and then after they've booked, they cancel because you called them up once you got their phone number so they can book direct. That kind of activity is going to get found, especially in the modern age of AI. They're gonna find things like that. It's not just a keyword search anymore for them to figure it out. And they're not limited to the processing capability of a bunch of humans. They've got AI who's scrubbing these messages threads like on a 24/7 basis. So that calendar comes into software control as well. So we've already seen Airbnb impact hosts that are just on the Airbnb platform versus hosts that use an OTA. When you're using software like HostAway or Hospitable or Hostfully, I think that impacts your visibility as well. I'm not sure if it has a big difference or a little difference, but like I told you already, I think that the properties that are the most successful happen to be on one platform and they do that one platform really well. Now, we all want to be diversified and there's value in that. I'm just saying, I think that blocking the calendar, I think that the software controlling your profile, I think that does have something to do with it. Another thing to consider is that having that software impacts the completeness of your listing. One of the reasons for this is when you go from your winter pictures to your summer pictures, like you've got to go back in, disconnect your software, update the photo tour, add in your descriptions. Like you have to make it complete and then bring it back into your software. It's so annoying for us as property managers to be going through this so frequently, but it is part of the job and it does impact your visibility. We already talked about momentum, but this is where I had momentum in my notes is that once you do build that momentum, I feel like that momentum is what causes Airbnb to push you. It's the conversion rate has been built up for, this whole period of time for all these different reasons. It's looking at the past, couple of days and it's seeing that you're getting a lot of bookings. So it goes up. It's like, what have you done for me lately? Right? It's not just how much have you done for me, it's what have you done for me lately? So it's sweet but sour when you've got a 30-night stay. It's like, great, this is wonderful. And you accept a guest and they're there for a little while and there's not as much work to do because they've already figured out the house and there's not as many things going on. It's not like you're introducing to the property to another person every couple of days. A 30-night stay is a nice little relaxing relief. That's the sweet part. The sour side is for that 30 days, you're not getting any new reservations. So you kind of like fall off the visibility spectrum. It's like now you're blocked out for the next 30 days, even though it's because it's an Airbnb reservation, because you haven't gotten any inquiries lately, because you haven't gotten any new reservations lately, it's actually affecting you in the visibility spectrum. So the momentum has a lot to do with that. And so that in itself is a reason to not take long reservations. But, you have to kind of balance these things because it is really nice to get a long reservation. Whereas, you can build momentum back up. So, but both of those things have to be thought up together. Like when you get the inquiry for somebody who wants to stay for 45 days, you've got to think about, all right, well, what am I going to do 30 days from now in order to get my next open dates booked? And what am I going to do, 40 days from now in order to get those dates booked? Because the closer we get to the end of this reservation, I'm just going to be out in the middle of nowhere with no future reservations. So you have to think through that, when you take those longer reservations. And I still recommend taking them. It's just like, all right, well, we have to have a plan. That way I don't end up with an empty calendar wondering what happened to my momentum. It was killed because you didn't have any availability for 45 days. And because you didn't have any availability for 45 days and your booking window is typically 10 days, like you got to think, what am I going to do on day 35 and day number 40 and day number 45? Because this guest is going to be checking out and I need to have the momentum coming out of this long stay. So that's kind of all I have to say about momentum, but it does definitely affect your visibility. Another thing I think that they follow is your refunds to guests. So if guests are having a bad experience at your property, but you're sending them money, I think Airbnb is picking up on that. They're looking at the resolutions. Um, when you send a guest money, they do ask the question, is this because of a trip related issue? Or is this because of an additional service? Or is this because of something else? Are you changing the dates? All these different types of things. I think they're looking for clusters. They're looking at averages. They're looking at this is how much money we sent this host, and this is how much money they sent back. Now, it's kind of funny to think that Airbnb would care about this metric because it doesn't affect how much money Airbnb is getting. It doesn't even get taxes taken off. However, I think that they pay attention to this because most hosts are not sending credits to guests who are having a good time. I think that the correlation between credits to guests and experiences that are not what they expected is pretty high. So typically, when a guest is getting a refund, when they're getting a credit, it's because they experienced some sort of trip related issue. So if Airbnb wants to promote guests, coming to their platform, going to their properties, and then coming back someday in the future, then they're heavily invested in that guest actually having a good time. If you paid off your guest in order to get a 5-star review, then now Airbnb is kind of questioning, is this review actually legitimate? Or did they just pay this guest in order to get a good review? I don't know. This is speculation. I just think that you should, give your guests credits, but keep it under control somehow, or maybe even do it off the platform. That might be a bad idea for other reasons, but let's not get into that today. Back to visibility. So if you can employ a successful strategy of upsells, that is adding services to the reservation to where the guest is willing to pay extra for it, if you are able to get them to extend their stay as well, those are upsells that Airbnb does make more money from. They might not be making extra money from like, a decor package or, concierge shopping, but Airbnb likes to see hosts that are adding value to their guests, where the guest is willing to pay extra. So those additional things that the guest is paying, it's because of additional services that are being added or because of the dates being modified or the number of guests being modified. All of those things increase how much Airbnb is getting paid, but it also, I think, impacts your visibility because Airbnb sees you as a good salesperson. If they're extending their stay, if they're adding on a couple extra dates, those are all things that are beneficial. And then the next thing is the cancellation rate. So the cancellation rate is like, guests have already booked your property. How often are they canceling their reservation? Because that's another indication that the guest is not having a good experience. And if they do cancel, like that's a big deal. Now, if you cancel on the guest, I haven't even brought that up. You do that, that's you can expect your listing to tank if that's the situation. But what we're mostly talking to Victor about today is actually we don't know why we're tanking. And if he had canceled on a couple of guests, he would know. he wouldn't be asking this question. He would know it's because he canceled on a couple of guests. But nevertheless, when a guest cancels, whether they give you a reason or they don't give you a reason, this happens. And that's why they have the flexible cancellation policy, is they give those guests that opportunity. I think that Airbnb is looking at your listing and comparing your cancellation rate to other cancellation rates. These are all very small numbers, but they want to look for clusters. If there's like a bunch of guests that just canceled your property, like 2 cancellations within a week or 2 cancellations within a month, like that's a cluster. Like that's a problem. That's actually a big problem because now the guest is getting all of their money back and Airbnb is getting nothing. And this is doubly bad if you don't even get rebooked. So the guest canceling is a big deal. And if too many guests are canceling, that's going to affect your visibility because it tells Airbnb there's something wrong with this listing. I have a very well performing property that I was hosting last year. And last year, the homeowners blocked the calendar for 2 weeks in order to get their deck torn off and rebuilt. Did the deck need any work? No, it was just a little small. So them increasing the size was a long-term win. Did they review this idea with me first? No, I would have been all for it, but we would have done a few things in order to make this happen a little bit more smoothly. They're the boss, it's their property. If they want to block it out for 2 weeks so they can, build up the deck, that's their choice. So what actually happened and what I would have changed is I would have actually blocked those dates far earlier. That way it didn't seem like it was kind of a last minute deal. The second thing is I would have made sure that it actually happened in that period of time. What ended up happening was construction started, things went bad with the contractor, construction never finished. Well, it didn't finish on time. So they found a new contractor to finish the job. It took another 3 weeks until that new contractor was able to show up, and then another week for them to finish the job. So in that period of time, we had 3 reservations. So we had to notify all 3 of those reservations the week before they showed up that there was work going on this deck, that they wouldn't have access through the sliding glass door to the deck. And to all of them, we offered a small credit, something reasonable. I think it was like $450 as a credit for this inconvenience. The construction was not going on while they were there. There was no like dust for them to worry about. It wasn't dangerous. The doors were locked. It's just an inconvenience that they were not able to use the small deck that was there before. So what happened was this seriously affected our visibility. The guests that did stay with us, they got the credit. And then there was one guest that canceled. And then there was another weekend in that period where we got it booked. And then when we notified them that there was this ongoing work, they actually canceled shortly after booking. So those 4 weeks killed our visibility. And this is a very high performing property. It normally does extremely well. But it was like all of a sudden, the deck is all done and we're like, where are the reservations? What's going on here? And it was that we lost all of our momentum by blocking it for 2 weeks. It's that we got a reservation and then we got a cancellation. It's that we had a guest cancel after we told them they wouldn't have access to that deck. And then it's also that we sent a couple of refunds. It's all of these things that are all like speculative, but it's all in this closed little space of time. So over the course of that month, we did not get any new reservations, except for that one that I mentioned. I had to cut our prices in half. I lowered our base rate in order to increase the throttle. I had to add in special promos. I had to build up momentum again. And that took me 2 months to get back to the kind of pricing that we were at before this whole fiasco happened. So the new deck project cost them like $20,000. It cost their rental activity like $40,000. So the total cost for that deck upgrade was 50 grand. Now, if they had been presented with this pricing and saw that it was $50,000, they would not have done it. I can guarantee you. It's because it was $20,000 and they saw an improvement coming. But homeowners don't always understand the algorithm. They don't always understand how their decisions are going to affect you, your business, or even their rental activity. And that, guys, is why we're going through this. That's why we're discussing these things. The last thing, and this is purely speculation, but it would make sense if I was Airbnb. This is what I would be doing. The tone of your conversation. So AI is easily able to look through the messages on your thread and identify whether your guest is happy, whether your guest is upset, whether they are sad, whether they are regretting their life decisions, whatever is happening, or if it's an emergency. And now that Airbnb is employing AI in their algorithm, you would expect that they're searching through and not just looking for keywords like what they were doing before. Now they're actually looking at the tone of the message. So they're looking for red flags like, is this guest being encouraged to cancel the reservation to rebook direct? Is this guest being told that they can, break some community rules or break some host rules? Is this something that we need to care about? And Airbnb is looking through these things using their AI in order to tell, is this guest having a good time? So I feel like they're actually searching through these messages and these message threads, and that tone, the happiness of the guest, the comparative upsetness of other guests, or how harsh or how friendly the host is, I feel like these things are actually impacting your visibility. So even when the guest is being completely unreasonable, it's still not good for your visibility to go dark on this guest. So I feel like just the tone of the conversation is something that needs to be kind of carefully manicured. And you have to have this consistent tone with your guests where you are helpful, happy to help, responding back quickly. It's only a matter of time until they are also measuring how quickly you respond to guests, not just inquiries, but also like every single message that the guest sends, how long until you send them a response. And this is really going to suck for the people who are hosting on their own and they don't have VAs or AI or a co host to respond back to the guest right away, like that out of office message. Because sometimes guests will send you a message at like 4 a.m. And part of that's just because they're coming from like internationally, right? They might be in Madrid, where 4 a.m. here is like a reasonable hour, in Madrid. So like they might be looking at the message threads and saying, well, this host didn't respond to this guest for 4 hours. Like that's a big red flag. So I feel like that's coming. I don't know that it's actually impacting anything yet, but the tone of the conversation is definitely something that they can tell. It's definitely something that they can measure and see. Now, this might seem wild, but your visibility is being impacted by thousands of factors. And a whole bunch of those we haven't even discussed today. The way your rental is run is going to change the volume that your property does. It's a strategy for marketing. It's a lot of things all combined into one. There's a lot of factors that make a property manager good or a property manager bad. And there's a ton of factors that can make you as the host successful or unsuccessful. And Victor, I think you're seeing like through all these different parameters, how every decision that you make when it comes to price, every decision that you make when it comes to your listing, every decision that you make with your short-term rental business is going to impact your visibility. Your visibility impacts your reservations. It impacts how much you can charge per night. And it's not just about like using that throttle to get up to that cruising altitude. It's also about efficiency, right? So if you've got an issue with your hot tub and you keep giving your guests credits for the hot tub, like the tone of the conversation is negative because now they're identifying issues. And this could impact your visibility. Like, even though you're giving them a credit, now you're still less likely to get a 5 out of 5 for value. So you should just, like, in my opinion, fix the problem before the guest arrives. Add value to the guest before anything gets done. Like I have mentioned before, I really like putting soda in the fridge. I think most Americans like drinking soda. So we put a couple Cokes, a couple Diet Cokes, a couple Sprites, and a couple bottles of water. Why do we do this? Because anybody, even little kids, can drink sodas. And everybody drinks water. Not everybody likes water. I get it. But that's why we do these things. It's because one of the first things your guest is going to do when they walk into your house is check the fridge. I don't know why, but the fridge better be clean. And if you have something in there, it's going to give them that first impression that's really going to make a difference. You just kind of have to think that, like, these challenges that we're running into, the challenges that Victor's running into, these are the things that people don't really talk about when they sell this dream of easy passive income. but they're exactly the problems that make or break your operation. If you've got a situation or a question, then please email me your question and let me know if you're willing to call in. The email address is info@galvanizedmanagement.com. Your problem might be the next one that we break down, and chances are you'll help a lot of other hosts in the process too. If this episode helped you, then share it with another host who's in the trenches. Rate and subscribe too, so that we can organically reach more people. That's how we make the industry better. I'd also love to see you follow us on TikTok at Galvanized Investments and Facebook and YouTube at Galvanized Management. Until next time, stay steady, keep learning, and keep building something real. This is Short-Term Rental Problems and Solutions.